The morning mist clung to the mountains like a shroud as Sarah Chan adjusted her rifle scope for the 100th time that week. At 23, she had already earned a reputation that made hardened soldiers whisper her name with a mixture of respect and disbelief. But on this particular dawn in the remote highlands of Afghanistan, she had no idea that the next few hours would cement her place in military legend forever. Sarah's journey to this moment had begun 15 years earlier in a small farming town in Montana. Her father, a Vietnam veteran turned rancher, had taught her to shoot when she was barely 8 years old. What started as weekend hunting trips to put food on the table had revealed something extraordinary. Sarah possessed an almost supernatural ability to read wind, calculate distance, and place bullets exactly where she intended them to go. The local shooting competitions became too easy. By age 14, Sarah was outperforming seasoned hunters and competitive shooters 3 times her age. Her high school guidance counselor suggested she consider the military, but Sarah had different plans. She wanted to study engineering, to build bridges and design systems that would help people. The idea of using her skills to take lives seemed foreign and frightening. College changed everything. The September attacks had shaken the nation, and Sarah watched as classmates enlisted one by one. She struggled with her studies, unable to concentrate while knowing that people her age were fighting and dying overseas. The turning point came during her sophomore year when she received news that her childhood friend Marcus, a Marine, had been killed by a sniper in Fallujah. The irony was not lost on her. Someone with skills similar to hers had taken the life of someone she cared about. That night, Sarah made a decision that would alter the course of her life forever. She walked into the Army recruiting office the next morning and enlisted as an infantryman. Her recruiter, Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, was skeptical. Sarah was 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighed barely 120 pounds. She looked more like a college student than a soldier, which she technically still was. Basic training at Fort Benning was brutal. Sarah's physical limitations became apparent immediately. She struggled with the heavy equipment, couldn't keep pace during long marches, and found herself falling behind in almost every physical challenge. Her drill instructors seemed to take particular pleasure in her failures, often using her as an example of why women didn't belong in combat roles. But something remarkable happened during weapons training. The first time Sarah picked up an M4 rifle, everything clicked. Her shooting scores were so far beyond normal ranges that her instructors initially suspected equipment malfunction. They tested her with different rifles, different ammunition, and different conditions. The results were always the same. Sarah could place rounds with an accuracy that defied explanation. Word of her abilities spread quickly through the training battalion. Senior instructors began observing her range sessions, taking notes and making phone calls. Sarah was oblivious to the attention, focusing solely on becoming the best soldier she could be. She had found her calling, and nothing else mattered. The real test came during advanced marksmanship training. Sarah was paired with Derek Thompson, a cocky soldier from Texas who had been the battalion's top marksman before her arrival. Derek resented the attention Sarah was receiving and made no effort to hide his disdain for what he called affirmative action shooting. Their competition began informally during a qualification exercise. Derek consistently scored in the high 90s, excellent by any standard. Sarah's scores were perfect every single time. What made this even more remarkable was her choice of equipment. While Derek used a state-of-the-art precision rifle with premium ammunition, Sarah achieved her results with standard-issue gear that other soldiers considered adequate at best. The friendly competition escalated when their company commander decided to settle the matter once and for all. He arranged a formal shooting match with increasingly difficult challenges. The first round involved standard targets at various distances up to 400 meters. Both soldiers performed flawlessly. The second round introduced wind and weather variables. Derek began missing shots while Sarah remained perfect. The final challenge separated the exceptional from the legendary. At 800 meters, in a crosswind with moving targets, Sarah demonstrated something that witnesses would talk about for years. She didn't just hit the targets, she placed each shot in exactly the same spot on each target, creating groups so tight they appeared to be single holes from a distance. Derek, to his credit, accepted defeat gracefully and became one of Sarah's strongest supporters. He recognized that he had witnessed something special, a level of skill that transcended normal human capability. More importantly, He understood that Sarah's abilities could save countless American lives in combat. The Army's Sniper Selection Board took notice. Traditionally, candidates for sniper school required extensive infantry experience and demonstrated leadership capabilities. Sarah had neither, but her shooting abilities were too valuable to ignore. After much debate and several waivers, she was accepted into the Army's premier sniper training program. Sniper school proved to be Sarah's greatest challenge yet. The academic requirements were intense, covering ballistics, meteorology, camouflage, and fieldcraft. The physical demands were extreme, with students required to move undetected across hostile terrain while carrying heavy equipment. Most challenging of all were the psychological requirements, learning to function as a hunter of human beings. Sarah excelled in the academic portions, her engineering background providing an analytical framework for understanding complex ballistic calculations. The physical challenges remained difficult, but her determination compensated for her size disadvantage. She learned to use her smaller frame as an asset, moving through spaces that larger soldiers couldn't navigate. The psychological aspect nearly broke her. During her first training exercise involving human silhouettes, Sarah froze completely. The instructor, Master Sergeant Williams, a veteran of 3 combat deployments, recognized the signs immediately. He had seen promising students wash out because they couldn't reconcile their humanity with the requirements of their mission. That evening, Williams sat down with Sarah for what he called a reality check. He explained that hesitation in combat was not just dangerous for the sniper, but for every soldier depending on them. He shared stories of snipers who had saved entire units by neutralizing threats that conventional forces couldn't engage. He talked about the mathematics of warfare. Sometimes taking one life prevented the loss of many. Sarah listened intently, understanding intellectually what Williams was telling her. But understanding and accepting were different things entirely. She requested permission to call her father, something that was rarely allowed during training. Williams granted the request, sensing that Sarah was at a crossroads. The conversation with her father lasted only minutes but changed everything. He told her about his own struggles in Vietnam, about friends lost to enemy snipers, about opportunities missed because of hesitation. He reminded her that she had enlisted to honor Marcus's memory and to protect other soldiers like him. Most importantly, he told her that he trusted her judgment and would support whatever decision she made. Sarah returned to training the next day with a new sense of purpose. She threw herself into every aspect of sniper craft with unprecedented intensity. Her camouflage techniques became legendary among instructors. She could disappear into terrain that seemed to offer no concealment whatsoever. Her stalking abilities allowed her to approach targets undetected across open ground in broad daylight. But it was her shooting that truly set her apart. While other students struggled with long-range shots in variable conditions, Sarah seemed to exist in her own dimension of accuracy. She developed an intuitive understanding of environmental factors that allowed her to make adjustments that confounded even experienced instructors. The final exercise would determine who graduated and who returned to regular infantry assignments. Students were given a complex mission requiring them to infiltrate enemy territory, establish concealed positions, and engage multiple targets at extended ranges. They would be evaluated on stealth, accuracy, and mission completion time. Sarah chose an approach that seemed impossible to her instructors. While other students selected positions offering good concealment but requiring extremely long shots, Sarah planned to get close, dangerously close. Her route would take her through areas where discovery would mean certain failure, but success would provide shot opportunities well within her capabilities. The exercise began before dawn. Sarah moved like a ghost through the training area, using shadows and terrain features that others had dismissed as inadequate. By sunrise, she had positioned herself less than 400 meters from her targets, half the distance of her closest competitor's position. What happened next became the subject of intense discussion among sniper instructors for years afterward. Sarah engaged her targets with a speed and precision that seemed almost supernatural. Each shot was perfectly placed, each target neutralized instantly. Her total time from first shot to mission completion was less than half that of the second-place finisher. Master Sergeant Williams later described it as watching poetry in motion. Sarah had achieved something that combined perfect technique with an almost mystical understanding of her weapon and environment. She had become not just a sniper, but an artist whose medium happened to be precision rifle fire. Graduation from sniper school marked the beginning of Sarah's transformation from exceptional soldier to living legend. Her first assignment would take her to the mountains of Afghanistan, where Taliban fighters had been terrorizing coalition forces with their own skilled marksmen. The army was sending their best weapon to level the playing field. As Sarah prepared for deployment, she carried with her not just the technical skills she had learned, but also the weight of expectation. Commanders were counting on her abilities to save American lives and change the dynamic of engagement in one of the war's most challenging theaters. She had no way of knowing that her greatest test lay just ahead, in the form of a Taliban sniper whose reputation for lethality had earned him the nickname the Ghost of the Mountains. Their eventual confrontation would become the stuff of military legend, a duel between two masters of their craft that would determine not just the outcome of a single battle, but the fate of an entire region. The mist was beginning to lift from the mountains as Sarah completed her equipment check one final time. In a few hours, she would face her first real combat as a sniper. Everything she had learned, everything she had sacrificed, had led to this moment. She was ready to discover whether her extraordinary gifts would translate to the ultimate test of battlefield effectiveness. Little did she know that within days her name would be whispered with reverence throughout the special operations community, and that a Navy SEAL commander would find himself compelled to offer a gesture of respect that would challenge every assumption about rank, tradition, and the nature of heroism itself. The helicopter's rotors beat a steady rhythm as Sarah gazed down at the Afghan landscape below. The Hindu Kush mountains stretched endlessly in every direction, their peaks shrouded in clouds that seemed to touch the heavens themselves. Somewhere in those treacherous slopes waited an enemy whose reputation had grown to mythical proportions among coalition forces. Captain James Morrison, the unit commander, briefed Sarah and her spotter, Corporal Jake Martinez, during the flight. Intelligence indicated that a highly skilled Taliban sniper had been operating in the region for over 8 months. Coalition casualty reports painted a grim picture. 17 confirmed kills, all single shots, all at extreme range. The enemy sniper had never missed, never left evidence, and never been spotted. Local Afghan forces had nicknamed him Shaitan Kashikar, the Devil's Hunter. American troops simply called him the Ghost. What made this sniper particularly dangerous was his intimate knowledge of the terrain and his ability to vanish without a trace after each attack. Special forces teams had attempted to locate him multiple times, always without success. Sarah listened intently as Morrison outlined their mission. A convoy carrying medical supplies and construction materials was scheduled to traverse the valley in 72 hours. Intelligence suggested the Ghost would attempt to disrupt this mission, as he had done with previous humanitarian efforts. Sarah's job was to find him first and neutralize the threat. The landing zone was a small plateau hidden among the peaks, accessible only by helicopter and barely large enough for the aircraft to touch down. Sarah and Martinez would be completely isolated, with no possibility of reinforcement or rapid evacuation. If something went wrong, they would be on their own until the next scheduled resupply in 1 week. As the helicopter departed, the silence of the mountains enveloped them like a living thing. Sarah had trained in various environments, but nothing had prepared her for the absolute stillness of these peaks. Every sound seemed amplified. The scrape of equipment against rock, the whisper of wind through crevices, even their own breathing. Martinez proved to be an exceptional partner. A veteran of 2 previous deployments, he possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of Taliban tactics and an intuitive understanding of mountain warfare. More importantly, he approached their mission with the quiet professionalism that marked the best soldiers. There was no questioning of Sarah's abilities based on her gender, no macho posturing or attempts to take charge. He recognized her expertise and focused on doing his job to the best of his ability. Their first task was establishing a base camp that could serve as both observation post and fighting position. Sarah selected a location that seemed impossible to defend, but offered unparalleled visibility across the valley approaches. Martinez initially questioned the choice, as it left them exposed to attack from multiple directions. Sarah's explanation revealed the depth of her tactical thinking. She had studied satellite imagery and topographical maps for weeks before deployment. Every possible sniper position in the valley had been analyzed and cataloged. Sarah's chosen location was visible from several potential enemy positions, but those same positions were clearly observable from her vantage point. She was betting that the Ghost's confidence would lead him to take risks that she could exploit. The construction of their hide required nearly 18 hours of backbreaking labor. Using techniques learned in sniper school and adapted for the extreme environment, they created a position that was invisible from more than 50 meters away, but provided clear fields of fire across the entire valley. The hide incorporated natural rock formations and carefully arranged camouflage materials to break up any recognizable silhouette. Sarah's rifle was a customized M24 sniper weapon system, modified specifically for extreme long-range engagements. The weapon had been zeroed at sea level, requiring adjustment for the altitude and atmospheric conditions of the mountains. She spent hours recalibrating, taking into account factors that most snipers never had to consider. The waiting began on their second night. Mountain warfare required patience above all else. The Ghost could appear at any time, from any direction, and might be visible for only seconds. Sarah and Martinez established a watch schedule that kept one of them alert at all times, while allowing for necessary rest. Days passed without contact. Sarah used the time to study the terrain through her scope, memorizing every rock formation, every potential route of approach, every shadow that could conceal an enemy sniper. She began to understand why the Ghost had been so successful. The mountains offered countless hiding places and escape routes. A skilled operator could move through this terrain like water, appearing and disappearing at will. On the fourth day, Martinez spotted something unusual through his binoculars. A small reflection, visible for less than a second from a ridge nearly 1,200 meters away. It could have been sunlight on a piece of metal or simply a moisture-covered rock, but something about the timing and location seemed deliberate. Sarah examined the area through her rifle scope, adjusting magnification and studying every detail. The position would offer an excellent view of the convoy route while providing multiple escape paths. If she were the Ghost, it's exactly where she would set up for an ambush. But she saw no signs of human presence, no disturbances in the natural patterns of the landscape. They continued watching throughout the day, taking turns at the scope while maintaining overall security. As evening approached, Sarah began to doubt her instincts. Perhaps the reflection had been nothing more than natural phenomenon. But Martinez remained convinced they had found their target's position. The breakthrough came just before sunset. Martinez was studying the suspected position when he noticed something that chilled his blood. A shadow that had been present all day was now missing. Something that had been there was no longer visible. The Ghost was moving into position. Sarah took over observation, scanning methodically across the ridgeline. For nearly 30 minutes, she saw nothing unusual. Then, in the space between one heartbeat and the next, she spotted him, a human silhouette, barely distinguishable from the surrounding rocks, settling into what appeared to be a natural depression in the ridge. The range was 1,247 meters, according to her laser rangefinder. The wind was variable, gusting unpredictably through the mountain passes. The angle was severe, requiring complex ballistic calculations that would challenge even the most experienced snipers. These were exactly the conditions that had allowed the Ghost to operate with impunity for so many months. Sarah began her preparations with methodical precision. Every environmental factor was measured and recorded. Wind speed and direction at multiple points between her position and the target. Temperature, humidity, and barometric pressure. The angle of engagement and its effect on bullet trajectory. She even calculated the rotation of the Earth and its influence on the projectile's path over such an extreme distance. Martinez provided a constant stream of information, monitoring wind indicators throughout the valley, and tracking any changes in the target's position. The Ghost was clearly preparing for the next day's convoy, arranging equipment and establishing his final shooting position. He had no idea that he was being watched by someone whose skills matched or exceeded his own. The ethical dimension of what Sarah was about to attempt weighed heavily on her mind. This would be her first shot fired in anger, her first attempt to take a human life. All the training and preparation had led to this moment, but theoretical understanding was vastly different from practical reality. She thought about Marcus, killed by an enemy sniper not unlike the man in her crosshairs. She considered the 17 coalition soldiers who had died at the Ghost's hands, each one representing a family destroyed and a future erased. Most importantly, she focused on the convoy scheduled to travel through the valley in less than 18 hours. Innocent Afghan civilians would be aboard those vehicles, along with American soldiers whose only crime was trying to help rebuild a shattered nation. The ghost moved again, adjusting his position slightly and providing Sarah with a clearer view of his profile. Through her scope, she could see that he was an older man, probably in his 50s, with a beard and traditional Afghan clothing. His rifle appeared to be a Soviet-era Dragunov, likely acquired during the conflicts of previous decades. He handled his weapon with the confidence of someone who had never missed an important shot. Sarah's final calculations were complete. She had accounted for every variable she could identify, and several that most snipers would never consider. The shot was at the very limit of her capabilities, requiring precision that left no margin for error. A miss would not only fail to eliminate the threat, but would also reveal her position to an opponent who would certainly return fire with lethal accuracy. The moment of decision arrived with the settling of the mountain wind. For perhaps 10 seconds, the air became perfectly still. The ghost was motionless in his position, focused on his own preparations and unaware that death was racing toward him across the valley. Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger with steady, inexorable pressure. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder with familiar force, and the bullet began its journey through the thin mountain air. Time seemed suspended as the projectile covered the distance between hunter and hunted, carrying with it the hopes of countless soldiers and the promise of justice for those who had fallen. The impact was instantaneous and decisive. Through her scope, Sarah watched as the ghost simply vanished from his position. There was no dramatic death scene, no theatrical collapse. One moment he was there, and the next he was gone. The feared sniper who had terrorized coalition forces for months had been eliminated by a single shot fired by a soldier who had never before taken a human life. Martinez confirmed the kill through his binoculars, but both soldiers remained in position for several more hours. Taliban fighters often worked in teams, and the ghost might have had spotters or security personnel in the area. Only when darkness fell completely did they allow themselves to believe that their mission had been successful. The impact of that single shot reverberated far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Intelligence networks began reporting that Taliban morale in the region had plummeted following news of the ghost's death. The sniper they had believed invincible had been killed by an American soldier they knew nothing about. Psychological operations specialists would later confirm that the elimination of the ghost had disrupted enemy operations throughout the entire province. For Sarah, the successful shot marked a transformation from promising soldier to legendary operator. But she had no time to contemplate the implications of what she had accomplished. The convoy still needed protection, and intelligence suggested that other enemy snipers might attempt to avenge their fallen comrade. Over the following days, Sarah and Martinez continued their vigil in the mountains. No enemy snipers appeared, but their presence provided psychological reassurance to the convoy personnel. The knowledge that America's newest sniper legend was watching over them allowed the humanitarian mission to proceed without incident. When extraction finally arrived, Sarah had been in the mountains for 8 days. The physical toll was evident in her gaunt appearance and obvious fatigue, but the psychological impact was less clear. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, taken a life in service to her country and her fellow soldiers. The young woman who had once dreamed of building bridges had instead become a destroyer of America's enemies. The flight back to base camp provided time for reflection on what had transpired. Sarah understood that her successful engagement with the ghost would bring both opportunities and challenges. Military leadership would want to leverage her demonstrated abilities, probably assigning her to increasingly difficult and dangerous missions. But she had proven to herself and others that she possessed not just exceptional shooting skills, but also the mental toughness required for the most demanding operations. What Sarah didn't know was that news of her achievement had already reached the highest levels of military command. Special operations planners were studying her performance and considering how best to utilize her unique capabilities. A Navy SEAL commander named Colonel David Richardson had taken particular interest in her case, recognizing that Sarah represented something entirely new in the landscape of American military capability. Richardson's unit was preparing for an operation that would require precision shooting under conditions even more challenging than those Sarah had just overcome. He was beginning to formulate a request that would bring Sarah into the world of elite special operations, where her legend would grow beyond anything anyone could imagine. The secure conference room at Bagram Airfield buzzed with tension as Colonel David Richardson reviewed the mission briefing one final time. Around the table sat some of America's most elite warriors, Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, and Delta Force operators who had earned their reputations in the crucible of combat. They were preparing for Operation Silent Thunder, a mission so complex and dangerous that conventional forces had deemed it impossible. Richardson studied the faces of his team, each man a veteran of countless operations in the mountains and deserts of Afghanistan. But tonight, he was about to introduce an element that would challenge their preconceptions about warfare, teamwork, and what it meant to be an elite soldier. Tonight, he was going to tell them about Sarah Chen. The mission itself was born from desperation. High-value Taliban commanders had established a stronghold in a mountain compound that intelligence agencies had been trying to penetrate for over a year. The facility was built into the side of a cliff, accessible only through a narrow pass that could be defended by a handful of fighters against an entire battalion. Conventional assault was suicide, and aerial bombardment would likely destroy valuable intelligence while allowing key personnel to escape through tunnel networks. What made this target particularly critical was recent intelligence indicating that the compound housed not just Taliban leadership, but also foreign fighters planning attacks against American interests worldwide. The window for action was closing rapidly, as communications intercepts suggested the commanders would relocate within days. Richardson had been tasked with developing an unconventional solution. His plan was audacious in its simplicity. A small team would infiltrate the area under cover of darkness, establish overwatch positions, and systematically eliminate sentries and key personnel before a larger force moved in to secure the compound. Success depended entirely on precision shooting under the most challenging conditions imaginable. The problem was range. The only positions that offered clear lines of sight to the target were over 1,800 meters away, across a valley swept by unpredictable mountain winds. The shots would have to be made in complete darkness, using night vision equipment that limited depth perception and visual clarity. Even the most skilled snipers in Richardson's unit considered such shots nearly impossible. That's when Richardson's intelligence officer mentioned a young Army sniper who had recently eliminated a high-value target at extreme range under similar conditions. The report described Sarah's engagement with the Ghost in terms that seemed almost mythical. A single shot at over 1,200 meters, in mountain conditions, against a target that had evaded capture for months. Richardson's initial reaction was skepticism. Military reports often contained exaggerations, and the claimed level of precision seemed beyond human capability. But follow-up investigations confirmed every detail of Sarah's achievement. More importantly, interviews with her spotter and other witnesses painted a picture of someone whose abilities transcended normal human limitations. The decision to request Sarah's attachment to the SEAL team was unprecedented. Special operations units rarely worked with personnel from conventional Army units, especially soldiers without specialized training in their tactics and procedures. The cultural barriers alone were enormous, as these elite warriors had earned their status through years of grueling selection processes that weeded out all but the most exceptional candidates. But Richardson understood that exceptional situations required exceptional solutions. If the mission was to succeed, they needed shooting capabilities that simply didn't exist within his current team. Sarah represented their best chance of achieving the impossible, regardless of her lack of special operations credentials. The notification came through official channels, but Sarah first learned about her new assignment from Captain Morrison. She was cleaning her rifle after a routine training exercise when Morrison approached with an expression that mixed excitement and concern. The message was brief and classified. Report to Bagram Airfield for immediate attachment to a special operations unit for a mission of critical national importance. Sarah's first reaction was disbelief. She had been an Army sniper for less than a year and had only recently completed her first combat deployment. The idea that special operations forces would request her services seemed impossible. But Morrison's serious demeanor made it clear this was no mistake or administrative error. The flight to Bagram provided time for Sarah to contemplate what lay ahead. She understood that Special Operations Forces represented the pinnacle of military excellence, populated by warriors whose dedication and capabilities were legendary even among combat veterans. The prospect of working alongside such elite soldiers was both thrilling and terrifying. Her arrival at the Special Operations compound was a study in culture shock. Everything about the facility reflected a level of professionalism and resources that exceeded anything in her previous experience. Equipment was state-of-the-art, facilities were immaculate, and personnel moved with the confident efficiency of people who had never failed at anything important. Sarah's first meeting with Richardson set the tone for what would become a relationship of mutual respect built on shared commitment to mission success. The colonel was a compact man in his early 40s, with the weathered appearance of someone who had spent years in harsh environments. His initial assessment of Sarah was clinical and thorough, evaluating not just her shooting abilities but also her psychological readiness for the challenges ahead. Richardson's questions probed areas that conventional military training rarely addressed. How did Sarah handle the psychological impact of taking human life? Could she function effectively under extreme stress when lives depended on her performance? Did she possess the mental toughness to operate in complete isolation while surrounded by hostile forces? Sarah's answers revealed the depth of her character and the clarity of her commitment. She spoke honestly about her struggles with the moral dimensions of her role, while demonstrating an unshakable dedication to protecting her fellow soldiers. Richardson recognized in her the same qualities that defined his most trusted operators: absolute reliability under pressure and an willingness to sacrifice everything in service of the mission. The integration process began immediately. Sarah was introduced to the team members who would depend on her skills in the coming operation. Master Chief Petty Officer Mike Sullivan, the team's senior enlisted leader, possessed 20 years of experience in special operations and had participated in some of the military's most sensitive missions. His initial skepticism about working with an outsider was evident but professional. Petty Officer First Class Tony Garcia, the team's communications specialist, brought a different perspective to Sarah's arrival. Garcia had grown up in a family with strong military traditions and understood that excellence could emerge from unexpected sources. His acceptance of Sarah as a team member came quickly once he witnessed her dedication to preparation and attention to detail. The most challenging relationship was with Staff Sergeant Mark Davis, the team's designated marksman and Richardson's most experienced sniper. Davis had earned his reputation through years of successful operations and took pride in being considered one of the best shooters in special operations. Sarah's arrival represented both a professional challenge and a potential threat to his status within the team. Davis's initial test of Sarah's abilities was subtle but unmistakable. During a routine equipment check, he casually mentioned that the team's standard for precision was considerably higher than conventional Army requirements. The implication was clear. Sarah's previous achievements might not translate to the elite level of performance expected in special operations. Sarah's response was to quietly request access to the unit's shooting range. For the next several hours, she demonstrated the skills that had made her legendary among conventional forces. Davis watched in growing amazement as Sarah consistently achieved levels of accuracy that he had previously considered impossible. By the end of the session, his skepticism had transformed into genuine respect for her extraordinary abilities. The mission briefing revealed the full scope of the challenge they were undertaking. The target compound was located in terrain so forbidding that previous reconnaissance efforts had failed to gather adequate intelligence. The approach would require a night infiltration across enemy territory, followed by a climb to shooting positions that offered minimal concealment and no possibility of rapid escape. Sarah's role was clearly defined but terrifyingly demanding. She would be responsible for eliminating sentries and key personnel at ranges exceeding 1,800 meters in complete darkness using equipment she had never worked with before. The margin for error was non-existent, as a single missed shot would compromise the entire operation and likely result in the deaths of her teammates. Preparation for the mission consumed every waking moment over the following week. Sarah immersed herself in the specialized equipment and techniques used by special operations forces. Night vision technology was far more advanced than anything she had previously encountered, but it required extensive practice to master the subtle differences in depth perception and target acquisition. The rifle selected for the mission was a custom-built system that represented the pinnacle of precision shooting technology. Every component had been carefully selected and precisely adjusted to maximize accuracy at extreme ranges. Sarah spent countless hours learning the weapon's characteristics and developing the muscle memory necessary for consistent performance under stress. Physical conditioning became another crucial element of preparation. The infiltration route would require Sarah to carry her equipment across terrain that challenged even the superb fitness levels of special operations personnel. Her smaller physical stature, initially seen as a disadvantage, actually proved beneficial for the climbing and movement required to reach their objective. Perhaps most importantly, Sarah had to learn to function as part of a special operations team. The level of coordination and mutual dependence required for mission success exceeded anything in conventional military operations. Each team member's life depended on the other's ability to perform their assigned roles with absolute precision and reliability. Richardson watched Sarah's integration with growing confidence. She demonstrated not just exceptional shooting skills, but also the adaptability and mental toughness that defined elite operators. More importantly, she had earned the respect and acceptance of team members who were notoriously skeptical of outsiders. The final mission briefing took place just hours before infiltration. Intelligence updates had confirmed the presence of high-value targets at the compound, but also revealed increased security measures that would make the operation even more challenging. Sarah's shooting positions had been adjusted to account for new guard posts, requiring even longer shots under more difficult conditions. As the team prepared their equipment for the final time, Richardson gathered them together for his traditional pre-mission talk. He spoke about the importance of their objective and the trust that had been placed in their abilities. But his words carried special meaning for Sarah, who was about to undertake her first special operations mission. Richardson's concluding remarks focused on the unique nature of their team and the individual qualities that each member brought to the mission. When he spoke about Sarah, his words carried a weight that surprised even veteran team members. He described her not as an attached Army sniper, but as an integral part of their unit, someone whose contributions were essential to mission success. The helicopter lifted off from Bagram just after midnight, carrying the team toward their target in the remote mountains. Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension as she contemplated the challenges ahead. Everything in her military career had led to this moment, and she was determined to prove worthy of the trust that had been placed in her abilities. What Sarah didn't know was that this mission would become the foundation of her legend within the special operations community. The shots she was about to take would redefine what was considered possible in precision marksmanship and establish her reputation as one of the most capable snipers in American military history. As the helicopter disappeared into the darkness of the Afghan night, Richardson found himself reflecting on the remarkable journey that had brought Sarah to this moment. Tomorrow, the world would discover what he had already begun to suspect, that they were witnessing the emergence of something truly extraordinary in the landscape of modern warfare. The helicopter's rotors whispered through the thin mountain air as the team prepared for insertion. Sarah checked her equipment one final time, her fingers moving with practiced precision across the specialized gear that would determine the success or failure of Operation Silent Thunder. In less than 6 hours, she would attempt shots that pushed beyond the boundaries of what military snipers considered possible. The landing zone was a narrow ledge barely wide enough for the aircraft, carved into the mountainside at an elevation that made breathing difficult, even for these supremely conditioned operators. Master Chief Sullivan led the team off the helicopter with practiced efficiency, each member disappearing into predetermined positions while the aircraft vanished back into the darkness. Sarah found herself partnered with Petty Officer Garcia, whose job was to provide security and communications support while she focused on the precision shooting that would make or break their mission. Garcia had initially been skeptical about working with someone from outside the special operations community, but Sarah's professionalism during training had earned his complete confidence. The infiltration route led through terrain so treacherous that conventional forces would have considered it impassable. Loose rock and steep gradients required the team to move with extreme caution, as a single dislodged stone could alert enemy sentries to their presence. Sarah's smaller size proved advantageous as she navigated passages that challenged even the most agile team members. 3 hours into their movement, they reached the overwatch position that Sarah would use for her shots. The location offered clear lines of sight to the target compound, but was exposed to observation from multiple enemy positions. Establishing concealment required careful arrangement of camouflage materials and natural terrain features, creating a hide that would be invisible from the distances involved while providing Sarah with the stability she needed for precision shooting. The compound itself exceeded intelligence descriptions in terms of defensive sophistication. Built into the cliff face with overlapping fields of fire and carefully positioned guard posts, it represented a fortress that could withstand assault by conventional forces many times the size of Richardson's team. Success would depend entirely on Sarah's ability to systematically eliminate key defenders before the main assault began. Sarah began her target assessment with methodical precision, identifying guard positions and patterns of movement through her night vision scope. The compound housed approximately 40 enemy fighters, but only a dozen were positioned where they could effectively resist the planned assault. Those dozen men represented the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The first target was a sentry positioned in a guard tower that commanded views of all approach routes to the compound. At 1847 meters range, in a crosswind that varied unpredictably through the mountain passes, the shot represented one of the longest successful sniper engagements in military history. Sarah had practiced similar shots during training, but the stakes could not have been higher. Garcia monitored enemy communications while providing Sarah with real-time updates on wind conditions and target movement. His whispered observations created a picture of enemy activities that allowed Sarah to time her shots for maximum effectiveness. The coordination between them reflected the seamless teamwork that defined special operations at its finest. Sarah's breathing slowed to the deep, controlled rhythm that preceded her most difficult shots. Every environmental factor had been calculated and incorporated into her firing solution. The custom rifle felt perfectly balanced in her hands, its advanced optics providing clarity that seemed to compress the enormous distance between her position and the target. The moment arrived with a lull in the mountain wind. Sarah's finger applied steady pressure to the trigger, and the rifle recoiled with familiar authority. Through her scope, she watched the first sentry simply disappear from his position, eliminated so quickly that nearby guards initially failed to realize what had happened. The second shot followed 30 seconds later, targeting a guard who had begun investigating his comrade's absence. This engagement was even more challenging, as the target was moving and partially concealed behind protective barriers. Sarah's bullet found its mark with surgical precision, dropping the guard before he could sound an alarm. Richardson monitored Sarah's progress through encrypted communications, coordinating her shots with the movement of his assault teams. Each successful engagement opened new approach routes and eliminated defensive positions that could have devastated attacking forces. Sarah was single-handedly dismantling the compound's defensive structure with a precision that defied belief. The third and fourth targets fell in rapid succession as Sarah demonstrated shooting skills that seemed to transcend human limitations. Garcia watched through his binoculars in growing amazement as enemy positions were systematically neutralized by shots that covered distances he had previously considered impossible for precision engagement. The psychological impact on remaining defenders was immediate and devastating. Enemy fighters who had considered their position impregnable found themselves under attack by an invisible adversary whose capabilities seemed supernatural. Panic began spreading through their ranks as leaders attempted to organize responses to a threat they couldn't locate or understand. Sarah's fifth shot presented the most challenging target yet, a machine gun position that covered the primary assault route. The gunner was protected by concrete barriers and steel plating, with only a small target area visible through Sarah's scope. The shot required placement within a margin of error measured in millimeters, at a range where most snipers couldn't reliably hit the side of a building. The bullet struck with devastating effect, penetrating the gunner's protection and eliminating the position that had been considered the compound's strongest defensive asset. Richardson immediately ordered his assault teams forward, knowing that Sarah had created a window of opportunity that might last only minutes. As SEAL teams moved through the darkness toward their objectives, Sarah continued providing overwatch from her elevated position. Her remaining shots focused on targets of opportunity: guards who might interfere with the assault, leaders attempting to organize resistance, and communications personnel trying to summon reinforcements. The assault itself unfolded with the smooth efficiency that marked special operations at their best. Defenders who had expected to fight from prepared positions found themselves confused and demoralized by the systematic elimination of their leadership and heavy weapons. Resistance collapsed more quickly than anyone had dared hope. Sarah's final shot of the night eliminated a Taliban commander who was attempting to escape through a rear exit of the compound. The target was moving rapidly across broken terrain at a range that challenged the capabilities of her equipment. but Sarah's bullet found its mark with the same precision that had characterized all her previous engagements. The compound was secured within 45 minutes of the initial assault, with minimal casualties among attacking forces and the capture of multiple high-value targets. Intelligence materials recovered from the site would provide information that disrupted terrorist networks throughout the region. By any measure, Operation Silent Thunder had achieved objectives that exceeded the most optimistic projections. But the immediate tactical success was overshadowed by what Sarah had accomplished as an individual shooter. 8 successful engagements at ranges exceeding 1,800 meters, in darkness under combat conditions that would have challenged the most experienced snipers in the world. Her performance represented a redefinition of what was possible in precision marksmanship. Richardson's post-mission report to higher command described Sarah's contributions in terms that bordered on the poetic. He wrote that watching her work was like observing an artist whose medium happened to be precision rifle fire. Her technical skills were matched by an intuitive understanding of environmental factors that allowed her to achieve results that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The impact of Sarah's performance reverberated throughout the special operations community. Within days, her exploits had become the subject of intense discussion among elite units worldwide. The Navy SEAL community, notorious for their exclusivity and resistance to outside influence, found themselves forced to acknowledge that exceptional ability could emerge from unexpected sources. Colonel Richardson faced his own moment of reckoning as he contemplated how to properly recognize Sarah's contributions to the mission's success. Traditional military protocols provided no framework for acknowledging the achievements of an attached conventional soldier who had outperformed elite special operations personnel. But Richardson understood that extraordinary accomplishments required extraordinary recognition. His decision to personally commend Sarah represented more than simple appreciation for exceptional performance. In the rigid hierarchy of military tradition, a Navy SEAL colonel offering formal recognition to an Army enlisted soldier challenged fundamental assumptions about rank, service affiliation, and the nature of professional respect. The ceremony took place in the secure conference room, where Sarah had first been briefed on the mission. Richardson assembled his entire team, along with senior officers from multiple units who had requested permission to witness what many considered a historic moment. The formal language of Richardson's commendation barely contained his genuine admiration for what Sarah had accomplished. But it was Richardson's concluding gesture that transformed a routine recognition ceremony into something that would be remembered and discussed for decades. As he finished reading the formal commendation, Richardson came to attention and rendered a crisp salute to Sarah, holding the position until she returned the courtesy with obvious surprise and confusion. The implications of Richardson's salute rippled through the assembled officers like electricity. A Navy SEAL colonel, graduate of the most exclusive military training programs in the world, had just offered the formal respect traditionally reserved for superior officers to a young Army enlisted soldier. The gesture challenged every assumption about military hierarchy and the nature of leadership. Richardson later explained his decision in terms that revealed his deep understanding of what Sarah represented. She had demonstrated capabilities that transcended rank and service affiliation, performing at a level that commanded respect regardless of traditional military distinctions. Her achievements had earned recognition that went beyond conventional protocols. The story of Richardson's salute spread throughout the military community with remarkable speed. Social media platforms buzzed with discussions about the implications of the gesture and what it meant for traditional military culture. Some criticized Richardson for undermining established hierarchy, while others praised him for recognizing excellence wherever it emerged. For Sarah, the recognition represented validation of a journey that had begun with childhood hunting trips in Montana and led through challenges that would have broken lesser individuals. She had proven herself worthy of respect from the most elite warriors in the American military, earning acceptance in a community that rarely acknowledged outsiders. But perhaps more importantly, Sarah had demonstrated that exceptional ability could emerge from unexpected sources and thrive in environments that had traditionally excluded those who didn't fit conventional profiles. Her success opened doors for future soldiers who might possess unique capabilities that didn't conform to established patterns. The long-term implications of Sarah's achievements extended far beyond individual recognition. Military planners began reconsidering assumptions about sniper capabilities, and the potential for precision engagement at extreme ranges. Her techniques and equipment configurations became subjects of intensive study, leading to improvements in training programs and tactical doctrines. Sarah's integration into special operations also challenged cultural barriers that had limited opportunities for unconventional candidates. Her success demonstrated that elite units could benefit from diverse perspectives and capabilities, regardless of their source or packaging. As Sarah prepared to return to her conventional Army unit, she carried with her not just the memory of Richardson's unprecedented salute, but also the knowledge that she had permanently altered perceptions about what was possible in military service. Her legend would continue growing long after Operation Silent Thunder became a classified footnote in Special Operations history. The young woman who had once dreamed of building bridges had instead built something far more significant. A bridge between conventional and elite forces that demonstrated the potential for excellence to emerge from any source. Richardson's salute had acknowledged not just her individual achievements, but also the broader principle that greatness should be recognized wherever it appears. Years later, when military historians attempted to analyze the significance of Sarah's career, they would focus not just on her extraordinary marksmanship, but on what her success meant for the evolution of American military culture. Richardson's decision to salute a soldier who possessed no rank or formal authority represented a recognition that true leadership and professional excellence transcend traditional boundaries. The legend of the female sniper who earned a SEAL commander's salute would inspire future generations of soldiers to pursue excellence, regardless of the obstacles they faced. Sarah had proven that exceptional ability combined with dedication and courage could overcome any barrier and earn recognition from even the most exclusive military communities. In the end, Richardson's salute represented more than respect for individual achievement. It acknowledged the emergence of something new in American military capability, the recognition that excellence could emerge from any source and deserved acknowledgement regardless of its packaging. Sarah Chen had not just become a legendary sniper, she had become a symbol of what was possible when talent met opportunity in service of something greater than individual ambition.